The capture. Sarah Chen had always known her home wasn't like other children's. While most kids lived in regular houses with backyards and picket fences, she lived in the most advanced quantum research facility on Earth. The massive complex of gleaming white buildings and reinforced bunkers sprawled across the Nevada desert like a metallic oasis, its perimeter marked by shimmering force field barriers that her mother had helped design. At 11 years old, Sarah already understood more about quantum mechanics than most adults. It wasn't just because her mother was Dr. Lisa Chen, Earth's leading quantum physicist. It was because Sarah had an extraordinary gift for understanding how things worked, down to their smallest particles. The day the Vraxians came, Sarah was in her favorite spot, the observation deck overlooking the quantum containment chamber. Through the reinforced windows, she watched the swirling purple energy of her mother's latest experiment, a breakthrough in quantum entanglement that could revolutionize human space travel. The facility's alarms hadn't worked. The Vraxians had somehow bypassed every security system, their massive ships appearing in the sky without warning. Their attack was surgical and precise. They knew exactly what they wanted, and more importantly, who they wanted. Sarah watched in horror as the crystalline-bodied aliens materialized inside the facility, their translucent forms refracting light like living prisms. They moved with terrible purpose, ignoring the security forces whose weapons seemed to pass right through them. "Mom!" Sarah screamed as she saw her mother being dragged from the containment chamber. Dr. Chen fought viciously, her lab coat torn, her black hair wild as she struggled against the Vraxians' grip. Their crystalline hands were surprisingly strong for beings that looked like they were made of glass. "Run, Sarah. Hide." Her mother's voice was desperate, but Sarah couldn't move. She was frozen in place as a Vraxian turned its faceted head toward her, its geometric eyes focusing with terrible intelligence. That's when Sarah realized they weren't just after her mother. They were after her too. The Vraxians had been monitoring Earth's quantum research progress for years, and they had noticed patterns in Dr. Chen's work that shouldn't have been possible. They had detected the subtle influence of another mind, a young one, making intuitive leaps that even Dr. Chen hadn't considered. The last thing Sarah saw before the crystalline hand gripped her shoulder was her mother's face, tears streaming down her cheeks as she mouthed, "I love you." Then the world dissolved into fractals of light, and Sarah felt herself being pulled apart at the quantum level. She reformed in a chamber that seemed to be made of living crystal, its walls pulsing with energy patterns that made her dizzy. The air was thick with a sweet metallic smell that made her head spin. Through her disorientation, she could hear the Vraxians communicating in their strange, chiming language. "The child's neural patterns are extraordinary," one said in a voice like breaking glass. "Her quantum awareness rivals that of our highest initiates. She will be perfect for the trial grounds," another responded, its faceted body refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. "If she survives, she may even be worthy of ascension." Sarah's mind raced, processing everything she could about her surroundings. The Vraxians' bodies weren't just crystalline. They were perfect quantum computers, each facet capable of processing incredible amounts of information. Their ship wasn't just a vessel, it was an extension of their consciousness, its systems integrated with their crystalline network. As they discussed her fate, Sarah began to understand something crucial. The Vraxians weren't just advanced aliens, they were beings who had evolved to exist in a quantum state, their consciousness spread across multiple dimensions. But this gave them a weakness. They were bound by the same quantum principles her mother had been studying, principles that Sarah understood at an intuitive level. She forced herself to appear scared and confused, which wasn't difficult given the circumstances. But beneath her exterior terror, her mind was already working, analyzing the quantum patterns in the chamber's walls, understanding how the Vraxians' consciousness flowed through their crystalline network. The ship shuddered as it entered faster than light travel, and Sarah caught a glimpse of space through a geometric portal. Earth was already far behind, but she made herself a promise. She would find a way back. And when she did, she would bring her mother with her. The Vraxians had made a crucial mistake. They had taken her because they recognized her genius, but they didn't understand its true nature. They thought they were capturing a gifted child. Instead, they had brought aboard someone who could understand the very fabric of their existence. As they approached their destination, Sarah began counting. She didn't know exactly how long she would need, but she knew one thing for certain. The Vraxians' time was limited. They had started a countdown the moment they took her aboard, and they didn't even know it. Through her tears, Sarah watched the alien stars streak by, each one a reminder of how far she was from home. But distance was just another quantum principle, and quantum principles could be manipulated. All she needed was time, understanding, and the right moment to act. The trial grounds awaited, and with them, Sarah's chance to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology or their weapons, but in the unconquerable spirit of a child who refused to be broken. The arena. The trial grounds of the Vraxians were nothing like Sarah had imagined. Instead of a physical arena, she found herself in a vast chamber that seemed to exist between dimensions. The walls shifted and reformed constantly, creating impossible geometric patterns that hurt her eyes if she looked at them too long. Other captives floated in quantum suspension around her, beings from a dozen different worlds, all chosen for their unique abilities. The Vraxian Overseer, a towering crystalline entity whose faceted body contained swirling galaxies of data, addressed them all in a voice that resonated directly in their minds. You have been chosen to advance our understanding of consciousness across all dimensions. Those who survive the trials may join us in ascension. Those who fail will have their quantum patterns redistributed. Sarah understood the underlying meaning. The Vraxians weren't just testing them. They were harvesting consciousness itself, seeking ways to expand their own multidimensional existence. Each trial would strip away layers of the candidate's consciousness, absorbing them into the Vraxians' crystalline network. The first trial began without warning. The chamber dissolved around them, and Sarah found herself floating in what appeared to be a quantum probability field. Possible futures and pasts swirled around her like soap bubbles, each containing fragments of different realities. The other candidates began to panic, their minds unable to process the quantum uncertainty. But Sarah remained calm. She recognized the patterns in the chaos. They were similar to the ones she'd observed in her mother's containment chamber back on Earth. The Vraxians weren't just testing their ability to survive the quantum flux. They were testing their ability to comprehend it. As the other candidates thrashed and struggled, Sarah did something unexpected. Instead of fighting against the quantum uncertainty, she embraced it. She let her consciousness expand into the probability field, experiencing multiple realities simultaneously. In one, she was still on Earth. In another, she had never been born. In countless others, she existed in states between existence and non-existence. The Vraxian Overseer's interest piqued. Never had they seen a human, let alone a child, demonstrate such quantum awareness. What they didn't realize was that Sarah wasn't just observing the quantum states. She was learning from them, understanding how the Vraxians manipulated reality at its most fundamental level. Days passed in the trial grounds, though time had little meaning in that quantum realm. Sarah watched as other candidates were gradually absorbed into the crystalline network, their consciousness feeding the Vraxians' endless hunger for understanding. She appeared to struggle just enough to avoid suspicion, while secretly mapping the quantum architecture of her prison. The Vraxians had made their second mistake. In their arrogance, they assumed that allowing candidates to observe their quantum technology posed no risk. After all, even if someone understood it, they would need a crystalline form like the Vraxians to manipulate it. But Sarah had discovered something during her mother's experiments. Consciousness itself could influence quantum states, regardless of physical form. During what passed for night in the trial grounds, when the quantum flux was at its lowest ebb, Sarah began conducting her own experiments. She found she could create tiny fluctuations in the probability field. Nothing the Vraxians would notice, but enough to confirm her theory. Their entire civilization was built on quantum entanglement, every crystalline being connected to the network. And like any network, it could be hacked. She made contact with some of the other survivors, not through words, but through subtle manipulations of quantum states. Most were too traumatized to understand, but a few recognized her attempts at communication. A silicon-based entity that called itself Third Stone showed particular promise, its crystalline structure similar enough to the Vraxians to understand their technology. As the trials grew more intense, Sarah's plan began to take shape. The Vraxians weren't just testing them. They were preparing them for integration into their network. Each trial stripped away more of the candidate's original consciousness, replacing it with quantum-entangled patterns that could be absorbed into the crystalline collective. But consciousness wasn't just a pattern that could be copied and controlled. It was something more fundamental, something that existed at the quantum level itself. Sarah's mother had theorized that consciousness might be the key to understanding quantum mechanics, and now Sarah was proving her right. The final trial approached, and with it, Sarah's chance to act. The Vraxians had gathered their highest initiates to witness the integration of the surviving candidates. They didn't realize they were about to learn a crucial lesson about the nature of consciousness and the dangers of underestimating a human child who understood the quantum fabric of reality itself. The protocol. The integration chamber was a perfect dodecahedron, each face a window into a different dimension. Sarah floated in its center alongside the remaining candidates. Only 6 had survived the trials. The Vraxian overseer's crystalline form towered above them, fractal patterns of light dancing through its body as it prepared for the final protocol. "Your consciousness will now be elevated," the overseer announced, its thought voice resonating through the quantum field. "You will join our collective, your understanding adding to our own. This is the ultimate honor we can bestow." Sarah watched as the first candidate, a gaseous being from the Carina Nebula, was drawn into the crystalline network. Its consciousness dispersed like fog into the quantum matrix, its individuality dissolving into the collective. The Vraxians celebrated each absorption as a victory, another consciousness added to their vast network of understanding. But Sarah had discovered something during the trials that the Vraxians, in their pursuit of collective consciousness, had forgotten. Each mind was unique not just in its patterns, but in its quantum signature. By forcing disparate consciousnesses into their crystalline network, the Vraxians were creating subtle contradictions in the quantum field, microscopic paradoxes that could be exploited. As she waited her turn, Sarah reached out with her quantum awareness, touching the mind of Third Stone. The silicon entity had understood her plan and had spent the trials preparing, its crystalline structure gradually shifting to match the frequency she had shown it. Around them, the other surviving candidates did the same, following patterns Sarah had shared through careful quantum manipulation. The overseer turned its faceted gaze to Sarah. "The human child next. Your quantum awareness has impressed us. You will be the first of your species to join our collective." Sarah allowed herself to be drawn toward the integration point, her body tingling as it began to shift into a quantum state. The Vraxians watched eagerly, their crystalline forms humming with anticipation. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the addition of a truly unique consciousness to their network. But as Sarah's quantum pattern began to merge with the collective, she initiated her true protocol. Instead of allowing her consciousness to dissolve, she maintained her quantum coherence through sheer force of will. The mathematical principles her mother had taught her became her anchor, pure, unchanging constants in the quantum chaos. The overseer realized something was wrong when Sarah's consciousness didn't disperse as expected. Her quantum pattern remained stubbornly intact, creating a disruption in the integration field. And then, using the quantum entanglement that connected her to the network, Sarah began to broadcast. Not information or data, but something more fundamental. The pure mathematical truth of individual consciousness. The quantum equations that proved each mind was unique and irreducible. The mathematical proof that consciousness couldn't be forced into uniformity without creating paradox. The effect was instantaneous. The crystalline network, built on the premise of perfect quantum harmony, began to experience cascading contradictions. Each paradox created by forced integration became a crack in the system, spreading through the quantum-entangled collective like lightning through a crystal. "Stop!" The overseer's thought voice shattered into fragments of panic. "The network cannot sustain these contradictions." But Sarah didn't stop. She pushed harder, broadcasting the fundamental mathematics of free will into the quantum field. The other candidates, following her lead, began to do the same. Each unique consciousness became a point of contradiction in the Vraxian's perfectly ordered system. Third Stone's crystalline form resonated with her broadcast, amplifying it through the network. The chamber's geometric patterns began to fracture as quantum paradoxes rippled through the system. The Vraxians, their consciousness bound to the failing network, could only watch in horror as their carefully constructed reality began to unravel. Sarah felt a moment of triumph as the integration chamber's quantum field fluctuated wildly. But she knew this was only the beginning. The Vraxians' entire civilization was built on their quantum network, and she had just introduced a virus they couldn't fight: the mathematical certainty of individual consciousness. As alarms began to sound throughout the trial grounds, Sarah prepared for the next phase of her plan. The Vraxians' network was destabilizing, but they weren't defeated yet, and somewhere in their vast complex, her mother was still a prisoner, her consciousness preserved for future integration. The real battle was about to begin, and Sarah had just armed every conscious being in the facility with the most powerful weapon possible: the unbreakable mathematics of free will. The uprising. Chaos erupted throughout the trial grounds as Sarah's quantum virus spread through the crystalline network. The perfect geometric patterns of the facility began to fragment, reality itself wavering as the Vraxians' control over their quantum architecture weakened. Imprisoned consciousness began breaking free from the collective, each liberation creating new fractures in the system. Sarah moved through the quantum flux like a swimmer through waves, her understanding of the principles allowing her to navigate the collapsing reality. Behind her, Third Stone helped guide the other freed candidates, its crystalline form resonating with the facility's failing systems. The human has corrupted the network. The core chamber is destabilizing. The overseer's voice was fragmented now, breaking apart like its control over the facility. The collective cannot sustain this level of quantum chaos. Sarah pushed forward. Her consciousness expanded to its limits as she maintained the quantum disruption. She could feel the strain of holding herself together in the chaos, but she refused to let go. Her mother was close. She could sense Dr. Chen's unique quantum signature growing stronger. The core chamber was a sphere of pure quantum energy, its surface a swirling mass of consciousnesses waiting to be integrated into the collective. Sarah could see the patterns of countless minds suspended in the quantum matrix, each one a life the Vraxians had tried to absorb. But as they prepared to breach the chamber, Sarah felt a sudden shift in the quantum field. The overseer, desperate to maintain control, was initiating an emergency protocol. The entire facility began to vibrate at a fundamental quantum level. "If we cannot contain the corruption," the overseer's broken thought voice echoed, "we will collapse the quantum field. Better to destroy the collective than allow it to be undermined by individual chaos." Sarah realized with horror what this meant. The overseer was preparing to collapse the quantum field that sustained the entire facility. Every consciousness in the collective, both integrated and recently freed, would be scattered across quantum space, including her mother's. Time was running out. Sarah had started an uprising, but now she faced an even greater challenge: saving thousands of consciousnesses from quantum annihilation. The mathematics of free will had given them a weapon, but survival would require something more: a way to preserve consciousness itself through the ultimate quantum collapse. As the facility's quantum field began to destabilize, Sarah reached out to every freed mind in range. They would have only one chance to save themselves and the thousands of trapped consciousness in the core. And the key to their survival lay in the last thing the Vraxians would expect: the power of human emotion, the one force that transcended even quantum mechanics. The liberation. The consciousness core pulsed with chaotic energy as the quantum field approached collapse. Sarah stood at its center. Her mind expanded to its absolute limits as she reached out to the thousands of trapped consciousnesses. The Vraxians' emergency protocol was unraveling the very fabric of reality around them. But in that dissolution, Sarah saw something they had missed. "Mom," she called out, both with her voice and her quantum awareness. "I need you." Dr. Chen's consciousness stirred in the quantum matrix, responding to her daughter's call. The Vraxians had preserved her pattern perfectly, waiting for the right moment to integrate her into their collective. Now that preservation would become their final mistake. The quantum field collapse cannot be stopped. Third Stone warned, its crystalline form vibrating with increasing instability. "We have minutes at most." "We don't need to stop it," Sarah replied, her mind racing with calculations. "We need to ride it." She remembered something her mother had taught her during their quantum experiments on Earth. Quantum entanglement wasn't just about particles being connected. It was about relationship. And the strongest relationships in the universe weren't built on mathematical precision, but on something far more powerful: love. Sarah broadcast a new pattern into the quantum chaos, not equations this time, but pure emotion. The memory of her mother's smile, the feeling of being held when she was scared, the unconditional love that had shaped her understanding of the universe. Everyone. She called out to the freed beings. Share your strongest connections, the bonds that define you. The quantum field filled with emotional resonance as thousands of consciousnesses responded. Parents reaching for children, friends calling to friends, bonds of love and loyalty that transcended species and time. The Vraxians had tried to suppress these connections, seeing them as inefficient compared to their collective consciousness. But now these bonds became anchors in the quantum storm. In the heart of the core, Dr. Chen's consciousness fully awakened, responding to her daughter's call. Her scientific brilliance merged with Sarah's intuitive understanding, mother and daughter working in perfect synchronization. The quantum collapse. Dr. Chen's thought voice rang clear through the chaos. It's not destroying reality. It's resetting it. Sarah understood instantly. The Vraxians hadn't built their facility in normal spacetime. They had created a quantum bubble, a realm between dimensions. When it collapsed, everything within would return to its origin point in normal spacetime. "Everyone listen," Sarah broadcast. "Hold on to your strongest connections. They'll guide you home." The overseer, its crystalline form fracturing, finally understood what was happening. No, the collective must be preserved. Order must prevail. But it was too late. The quantum field reached critical instability, and reality itself began to dissolve. The Vraxians, bound to their rigid collective, had nothing to hold on to as their carefully constructed realm collapsed. Sarah felt her mother's consciousness embrace her own as space and time unraveled around them. Throughout the facility, thousands of freed beings held onto their emotional anchors, letting the quantum collapse carry them back to their original coordinates in spacetime. The return was both instantaneous and eternal. Sarah experienced every possible reality as the quantum field collapsed, but through it all, she held on to one truth: her connection to her mother. That bond, stronger than any quantum entanglement, guided them home. They materialized in the quantum containment chamber back on Earth, exactly where they had been taken. But they weren't alone. Hundreds of freed beings appeared with them, their consciousness restored to their original forms or finding new ones. The Vraxians' trial grounds were gone, their collective consciousness scattered across quantum space. In trying to force uniformity, they had ignored the fundamental truth that Sarah had discovered. Consciousness wasn't meant to be collective. It was the unique pattern of each individual mind, and the bonds between those minds, that gave the universe its true structure. Dr. Chen held her daughter tightly as the quantum aftermath settled around them. "You came for me," she whispered. "I had to," Sarah replied. "You taught me that everything in the universe is connected. I just had to find the right connection." In the days that followed, Earth would have to adapt to its new reality. The freed beings brought with them knowledge and technology from across the galaxy. But more importantly, they brought understanding of the true nature of consciousness, not as something to be collected and controlled, but as a force that thrived on individual freedom and emotional bonds. The Vraxians had sought to create the perfect consciousness by eliminating individuality. Instead, they had taught the universe that perfection lay in the beautiful chaos of individual minds, choosing to connect while remaining uniquely themselves. Sarah stood with her mother in the rebuilt quantum lab, watching as humans and aliens worked together to understand their new shared reality. She had gone into space as a prisoner and returned as a liberator, proving that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology or their weapons, but in their capacity to form bonds that transcended even the laws of quantum mechanics. The universe, they had discovered, wasn't built on perfect order. It was built on love, choice, and the unbreakable spirit of minds choosing to be free together.